What is the strangest thing that happened to you that you can't logically explain? I once shut my ear in a car door. No idea how. Have tried to recreate it and can't. But my God, that hurt. I once was changing pants in my room before work and took off my belt. After putting on my other pair of pants, I went to put my belt back on, but it belt was gone. No one else was in the room and I spent a good 10 minutes looking for it as I had simply set it on the floor. It's been 10 years and I've never seen that belt again. When I was 10 years old, I didn't want to go to school one day. I faked a stomachache so my grandmother would let me stay home. I've always been a bad liar, so my GMA tried to call my bluff. She told me if I was too sick for school then she would be scheduling me a doctor's appointment. 3 hours later I was rushed into emergency surgery. My fake illness was actually appendicitis and it was so inflamed that if I hadn't come in that day my appendix would have ruptured, potentially killing me. I felt 100% fine that day. Faking sick saved my life. When I was about 12 years old I went up to Lake Tahoe with my friend and his parents who had a condo in Incline Village. One day, the two of us are walking to the bowling alley and cross a street in a crosswalk. Right before we get to the curb, a car comes really close to hitting us. All of a sudden, we're both up on the curb, like we were lifted a few feet. We both looked at each other strangely. Did you jump? No. Did you? No. We spent the next hour kind of dumbfounded. It didn't feel like a shove or any use of force. We were still in the street. Then we weren't. I'm too young to remember this, actually. But my mom always tells this story. Apparently, when I was younger, like barely able to speak, I was sitting on the floor playing with some toys nonchalantly with my mom when I just said, when I was in heaven, I met a woman who said you'd be the perfect mommy for me. I apparently held the belief that I was in heaven before being born. And an angel looked at me and chose the mom I went to. My mom asked me to describe the woman, and I apparently described my mom's great-grandmother perfectly. Down to the eye color. I had never met my great-great-grandmother, nor seen a picture of her. At friend's house. Friend was in garage working on dirt bike. Driveway empty because parents left a while ago. Go inside to grab a soda but decide to look for his cat, who I haven't seen all day. I walk into the office and as I am calling her name, a deep man's voice goes, meow, right into my right ear. I jump and run around the main floor looking for who said that. Didn't find anyone. A car going 50 to 60 kpm hit both of my knees in 2008. It was 100% my fault. I wasn't paying attention when I crossed the road, and not only I didn't have any broken bone whatsoever, I didn't even fall. I did flinch quite a lot, though. My knees and leg hurt for about 2 days. But I really can't explain how a car going relatively fast hit me, only got me to have barely more than a couple bruises. I hit a patch of black ice in the dark going 60 miles per hour down the highway. At the time, I drove a 1-ton cargo van. It hit the guardrail and flipped. Not only did I walk away without a scratch, the car was drivable and I was only 30 minutes late to work. Edit. A word. When I was younger, in elementary school, I used to have the same dream every weekend starting on Saturday, when I would go to sleep, and then waking up in the middle of the night, on Sunday, and throwing up. The dream was always a bunch of numbers. Not even anything happening, just a bunch of random jumbled up numbers all over the place. I never understood why that happened, where the same dream would happen on the same night every week and I would throw up every single time. I always think about it and wonder what it was or if it was just some weird coincidence. Also, I would not have any signs of being sick before or after. Maybe someone else has experienced this. I have a vivid memory of being at the Statue of Liberty as a child, on my dad's shoulders, seeing the skyline of NYC. I remember what we ate for lunch that day, etc. I remember the ferry we took. I've always thought about this memory and talked about it, but my family denies I ever went to NYC. I didn't go for the first time until I was 23. But strangely enough, when I went, I remembered everything just how it had been when I was there with my dad. When I was in primary school, like year 1 to 2, in the cafeteria there was all these cups filled with milk every lunch. Red, green, blue, but only one yellow cup. Everyone would fight to get the yellow cup like it was the holy grail, and it had been this way for years. One night I had a dream that the cafeteria had gotten more yellow cups in. And lo and behold, the next day, hundreds of yellow cups. I had a sleep paralysis nightmare when I was a kid, where I saw a red-eyed dark figure standing in the doorway. It's always stuck with me, and I've called him the boogeyman ever since. One day I was browsing Reddit and somebody painted a picture of their sleep paralysis demon. It was like the guy had painted my exact dream, and then a bunch of people commented that they had seen the same creature. It always makes me uneasy to think about. Edit. Here's a link to the picture I found. But I don't think it's the original post. Amp. Reddit. R. Creepy comments. 6J1 Sleep paralysis XR imaginary monsters. Both of my lungs collapsed at the same time, almost over 50% collapsed. And I was walking around like I was perfectly normal, until I decided to go to the ER for bubble sounds in my chest. None of the doctors could figure out why this had happened to me. They didn't know how I was just up and walking around and laughing. Edit. Word. Edit number 2 to answer questions. 1. I am a 5'7" thin woman. I have heard it is very common in tall and thin men. 2. Yes. It was bilateral pneumothorax. Doctor. Just couldn't figure why it happened. 3. I ended up having 4 more spontaneous pneumothorax within the span of 2 years. I am still a mystery in that hospital. 4. I was aged 19 to 21 when this was happening. 26 years old now. 5. They did pleurodesis procedure to get it to stop happening. Hasn't happened since. When I was in college, a drunk dude fell from a 3rd floor balcony and got up and walked away like it was nothing. Seriously, one of the weirdest, freakish things I've ever seen in my life. Edit. For those asking, University of Southern California circa 2009. My dad owned a small garden shop, so I'd stay behind the checkout after school till the shop closed. This was until I see a tall man wearing all black, like a trench coat, walking past my dad and smiling at me before going into a staff-only area. I jump up to stop him, even though I was 7. This back area filled with new shipments. I turn the corner but nobody is there. There was nowhere he could have gone. I ask my dad to check the CCTV after closing, but it's only shown me jumping up and running out of frame. Weird stuff. Never felt comfortable there again. I turned to the other person in the room, who I barely knew, and said, "My sister is getting engaged right now," without having the intent of speaking at all. He politely asked why I said that, and I had to shake my head and say, "I don't know." A few days later I found up that, sure enough, that exact moment on the far side of the world, she had said, yes, to Mr. Right. I hadn't even known she was dating. Long story short, I lost a jacket at a roller rink when I was in 3rd grade. I had a lucky rabbit foot in the pocket that I bought at the skate shop inside. Months later, my mother, who is adopted, found her birth mother and her half-sister. The first time I went to my newly found aunt's house, she said she had a jacket that might fit me. It was my jacket, rabbit foot still in the pocket. I was walking between bars in a college town and felt something hit me in the back. I turned around and saw a cue ball rolling down the sidewalk. I then spent the next 5 minutes walking up and down the street trying to figure out who threw it or what happened. I never found anyone. And I still have the cue ball. I swear my 4-year-old can read my mind, or we think on the same wavelength sometimes. I've randomly thought of a specific food, i.e. ice cream, which we rarely have, and he asked me, "Can we get ice cream?" Or I'll be thinking about my mom and he'll ask, "Can we go to grandma's?" When I was 10 I had a radio and bean bag chair in my room. As I was starting to fall asleep the radio suddenly changed the channel multiple times before I heard the bean bag chair in my room slowly fold in on itself, making the noise a bean bag chair would make if someone were to sit in it. Not sure what caused this, but certainly freaked me out. Several times a year I'll suddenly get a though that it's been a long time, usually months, since I last spoke with a particular friend or relative. Then I will get a voice call or an email from that person within a few hours. Can't explain it. I never tell them about this because I fear losing this strange thing that I have. Anybody else have this? I used to fence. The sport, not stolen goods. I was at a tournament and had just started a bout against a competitor. You win the bout by being the first to 5 points. I score what I believe to be first point, but the official indicates the match is over and I've won. I stood there confused for a second, but my opponent seems to agree and salutes and approaches for a handshake, so I go along with it. I check the scorecard and it says I've won 5-2. Totally lost probably 4 or 5 minutes of time. Hasn't happened since to the best of my knowledge, but it's been 20 years and I still wonder what happened. When my daughter was little and she would get upset, something in the kitchen would randomly break. Happened way too many times to be coincidental, and the things that broke did so in inexplicable ways. I clearly remember one instance very early in the morning standing in the kitchen, telling her she couldn't have cake from the night before. She immediately looked angry and I heard a weird plink sound in the cupboard. Opened it to find the plate on the top of the stack was cracked in several places. No signs of this in later years. She's 24 now and I often allude to this and remind her boyfriend not to piss her off. My grandpa died, and after about a year or two, my baby brother went looking for him in my grandpa's room. My parents thought I was with him, as he was laughing and babbling, and seemed entertained, which, knowing him, would be if someone else was there. But I was in my room, and my parents were downstairs. 30 minutes goes by. Parents start looking for him, and find him just there. He's not playing with anything in the room, just lying there. Now, he still goes into that room, looking for him. I wonder if he had seen his ghost. Or something like that. Edit. Correct time between death of grandpa and strange event. Had a dream that I got a phone call saying my brother that I haven't seen in 10 years had died. 2 days later I got a call that he actually had died. Time slipped by my friend and I one day. We got a contract in another town and drove out daily for 2 weeks. It was 1 hour to get there and 1 hour back, but one day it took us 3 hours to get back to town. My friend realized something was wrong when his wife called him up asking why he turned his phone off and why he was so late. We left a little before 2 p.m. and the call came almost at 5 p.m. To this day we can't explain it. And to further complicate matters, we both have receipts from a gas station we stopped at just before we got on the highway that are time-stamped a bit after 2 p.m. My theory is that the aliens took us for 2 hours, but who the hell knows. When I was like 8 I had a battery-operated lamp that worked for like a week with no batteries in it. Was the 25th anniversary of my dad's death. Was as always, thinking about it all day long. He was only 49 when he passed. Was passing a funeral home and got kind of sad. Little more than normal. Was just hitting me hard. I was as at a stoplight. Looked at car in front of me. License plates read, "Love Dad." A couple years back. I lived an hour and a half from a big city and my boyfriend and I were going to a concert. I wore a ring and due to car anxiety, I fiddled with it the entire drive to preoccupy my mind. While washing my hands in the bathroom at the concert, I realized the ring was no longer on my finger. It wasn't of any huge significant importance to me, but I did mention to my boyfriend that I was bummed to have lost it. When we got home and laid down for bed, I found the ring sitting on my bedside table, where I never kept jewelry because we lived with cats that would knock little things like that off. Still can't explain it. I was in my room watching Hulu, The Simpsons. Doesn't matter. And a Burger King commercial comes on, but it's just the King mascot and he's like, "Let's have a staring contest." And I'm like, okay. And I'm staring. He's staring and suddenly I blink. Immediately he says, "Gotcha. I won." And I was like, WTF. I slammed my laptop shut and was creeped out the entire night. I watched Hulu all the time in hopes of running into that commercial, but I never saw it again. When I was probably 14 I had a paper route. Once. My cousin slept over the night before and delivered with me. There's a wooded area in the backyard and when we opened the garage door to leave that morning, there was some strange noise coming from there. To this day, we don't know how to describe it other than that it sounded like a pterodactyl. It was this extremely loud squawking, it seemed. Scared the shit out of us. We went back inside and left out the front door and could still hear it from down the street. Neither of us ever heard it again. So strange and still have no idea what it was. I weighed myself. Took a poop. And weighed myself again. Weighed twice each time. Same scale. Same exact location. No clothing. Gained 0.6 kilograms. Not to me, but to my dad. He would get horrible nosebleeds as a young adult, so he had cauterization. And they all but stopped by his late 20s. Fast forward 20 plus years and he's driving on the highway with my mom and sister. Approaching an area where it drops to one lane. His nose starts hemorrhaging out of nowhere. Hadn't happened in forever. He pulled over for about 2 minutes to staunch the bleeding. Then they were on their way. They were quickly stopped by a small lineup of cars. Dead stopped. No emergency vehicles were on the scene yet, but there'd been an accident. Turns out a head-on collision with at least 2 fatalities had occurred about 2 minutes prior. A bloody nose quite possibly saved my family's life. When I was around 14 I went to the kitchen around 2 a.m. for a snack and the refrigerator door was wide open. Our cat, Magoret, was sitting on the floor looking inside the fridge. He turned his head and looked at me, then the fridge door slowly closed and he strolled away. Also several years later my stepdad woke me up at like 6 a.m. and Magoret's dead popped in my mind. He then told me that Magoret had died. That cat was mystical AF. In middle school there was a period of time where I thought my life was being recorded like on the Truman Show and I would have my inside voice narrate my actions in the third person all the time. It was automatic, not me consciously doing it. Felt like I was an actor in my own life. One day it just stopped. Not sure if it was a period of psychosis like the Truman Show delusion or what. I only vaguely remember it happening now. I felt like it happened for at least a year, but I could be wrong. This happened a couple days ago. And I'm really hoping someone can tell me there is a perfectly logical reason for it to have happened. I got a second monitor since class is all online now. I was moving my floor lamp when the cement fell out of the bottom. Weird, but okay. I got that lamp from my aunt. I then grab another floor lamp from my guest room that I've had since like 2007. And as soon as I stepped through the threshold to my room, that floor lamp's bottom dropped out. Crazy. I ask my son to borrow one of his he isn't using. Guess what happened when we got to my place with it? Yup. That's right. Bottom fell out. This is gonna be the most boring story on this thread. I can feel it. When I was 12, I was sitting on the front steps of our house when I heard a crackling sound and what sounded like wind blowing against flames. I looked up and saw a fireball overhead. It looked to be just a few feet above the roofline and traveled over the tree line until I couldn't see it anymore. Never even told my parents because it seemed so unbelievable. Best I got is having some obscure song in my head and turning on the radio and that song is playing. Or discussing an old movie with a friend and coming home scrolling through the TV at 3 a.m. and you see that very same movie is playing. Just sit like that really. Was at my girlfriend's house and in the kitchen chatting with her and her daughter, when I see one of my shoes, which I'd taken off next to the door, drop from 2 feet high from thin air. My girlfriend didn't see it but her 10-year-old daughter did. I still remember the slap sound as it hit the ground and rolled onto its side. I have no explanation other than a ghost, of which I fully believe in but had never experienced previously. Why do I open these threads when I know damn good and well I should be sleeping? Used to keep my old American Girl doll in my bedroom. One day I walked in and she was across the room laying on the floor. Put her back and left. Walked in later and she was on my bed. Dad and brother deny moving her. I don't keep her in my bedroom anymore. Dreams and deja vu. I will have deja vu moments and freeze in mid-task, like I had seen this scene play out before and already knew what would happen next. Took 15 years of this happening and lots of journal to realize these deja vu moments came from the dreams. I got on Reddit 5 minutes ago and yet the clock says 3 hours. Very strange coincidences and moments where I have a sudden understanding I'm completely in the exact time and place I am supposed to be in, and everything that ever happened in my life had led me to that exact moment. This actually happened last night, so I went to the bathroom and outside the door I hear someone walking. No big deal since I have siblings, that's when I hear fucking sniffing. That caught me off guard since the dog's in the kitchen. So I stay in there for a while more, then I hear someone walk by the door. Maybe it's grandma. No, I would hear her cane. Then I hear the sniffing again. Anyways, that's how I ended up staying in the bathroom for about 20 minutes. I was at a classmate's house for a party and I opened a door. And then I saw this kid sitting on TJE toilet and I thought, that was awkward. But then I stood there for some time, hanging out with the other classmates. And something I opened the door and there was no toilet. No child. It was just washing machines. IDKWTH that was. I was driving to work on a 2-lane highway, and I was going about 65 in a 45 zone when for some reason I got the feeling that I should slow down. I don't know why that thought came into my head as I was a young douchebag who sped all the time. But it was strong enough that I let off the gas and slowed down the speed limit, and right then, like 30 seconds later, a guy in a pickup pulled out of a parking lot right in front of me. I got on the brakes, but still T-boned him hard enough to knock the bed clean off his truck, and totaled both vehicles. Neither of us were injured, but hard to say what effect another 20 miles per hour would have had on that. Hubs and I going up to my parents' house on Christmas Eve. Hubs is driving. We're in the mountains. There's snow on the ground. It's just past midnight. I see a woman wearing shorts and a striped t-shirt, walking a dog, wearing no shoes. She has brown feathered hair, think Farrah Fawcett in the 80s. I turn to my husband to ask him if he sees this crazy woman. And she's gone. Weirded myself out, but laughed it off. Next day, I tell the story to my parents. They give each other a weird look. And my dad says, I've seen her, too. Sometimes when I walk at night, street lights will go out above me and turn back on when I'm a few meters away. It's happened ever since I was a kid. It's frequent enough that other people notice it happening around me. I literally don't understand how or why it happens. Edit with the amount of people saying it happens to them too. We need to make a sub for it and try and get a video of it. I was at a coffee shop grabbing drinks for my mom and I before we went out somewhere. My hands were full and someone offered to open the door for me and I said, no thanks, I got it. And the door flew open and stayed open until I walked through it. It was as if it was an automatic door, but this door wasn't motorized at all. The guy who offered to open the door did a double take. I walked away confused as to what had just happened. Then I just assumed it was the wind, but it wasn't windy. I went back to that coffee shop and hung out many times and I always watched that door. Even on the windiest days, never did that door budge or open on its own. I still don't know what happened, but it felt like I opened that door with my mind. My sister had 2 pet parakeets, named Tweety and Sweetie. One day, they somehow got out of their cage and flew away. We still haven't figured out how they got out of the enclosed cage. Nobody was home at the time. But that's nothing. Later that exact same day, my sister was inconsolable. I was outside and I see this very colorful small bird. Definitely not my sister's, but clearly not wild. We caught it and still have it today. Still haven't named it. One time I felt like I went through a quick time loop. I was working at a world market after close one night. Heard something. Turned my head and smacked it on a tiki stand. When I tried to think about the noise I heard, It sounded in my memory like the sound my head made when it hit the tiki stand. So, I was under the impression I hit my head on the tiki stand when I turned to hear the sound of me hitting my head on the tiki stand because I turned to hear the sound of me hitting my head on the tiki stand. I am always hitting my head on the tiki stand. I am always hearing the sound. Will I ever leave World Market? I was 20-ish. One day I called up my great aunt on a whim and asked if she wanted to get in my car and drive the 20 hours to Florida to surprise my grandparents, her brother for Passover. 8 hours later we started our trip. Turned out my uncle and his family had the same idea. We all got there around the same time. My dad and his wife heard the news and flew in the next day. Extended family were invited and we had this huge family reunion Passover vacation. Everything was perfect and was so much fun. The morning we were to get back in the car to go home, my grandpa died in his sleep, his head on his clasped hands like a baby. So peaceful. I got to spend the last days with my grandpa by sheer luck. We should all be so lucky to die like that. Tears as I finish this. I miss him terribly. 40-pound chair moved 10 feet across my room on its own right before my eyes. I went to uni in a big city. A guy and I met online and started talking. Found out we were moving into the same building in the same month. We started dating. We broke up. He moved on hella fast. I moved apartments at the end of my contract. He and his fiance moved across the hall from me 1 week after I did. It sucked and was weird. A pan spawned in our kitchen cabinet. Mint condition. Mid-large size. Perfect cookware to make ragu or stew. Thick and sturdy enough. No glass lid though, which is unfortunate. Can't explain how it came to us. It just appeared out of the blue, once I was searching for a pot and stumbled into this new pan chilling there with the others. It was not a gift. Nobody came over, so it's not like one of our friends could left it behind. And we didn't buy such thing. A strange thing that you could be grateful for. Actually. I had a dream my mom was cheating on my dad, and they were getting a divorce. I lived 2,000 miles away and hadn't spoken to them in over a month. And we rarely spoke even before that. Told my husband about the dream and was depressed all day. I went to read a book to try to cheer myself up when my phone started ringing. I looked at it and saw it was my dad, and I knew what the call was going to be about. Yup. Mom was cheating on my dad, and they were getting a divorce. I grew up in a very old house with many instances we couldn't explain, but this was the worst. I was in late high school. My dad was out of town on business. My brothers were both at boarding school. So it was just me and Mom, who was at Bible study this night. I saw the headlights on our garage. I heard her distinct car door slams and her opening the door, putting her purse down hard like she does, and yelled to say hi. I responded, "Hey Mom, how was Bible study?" No response. The house is suddenly eerily quiet. It creaked. You could hear every movement everyone made. No response. No hallway lights coming on to signal her walking through the house. Nothing. Mom came home for real about 45 minutes later. 17 years later I still wonder WTF. This happened in the first year after I got my driver's license. One day I was driving to college and then I noticed that the gas tank was almost empty. Even though I remember clearly that I fueled it earlier that week. So I stopped for gas. The car that was behind me was hit by a truck coming from the highway. No one survived. All the passengers in that car died. One night my clock in the kitchen stopped working at 10:17 p.m. The next day I get a phone call from my dad saying my grandmother had passed away in hospital the night before. When we were told the exact time of death I couldn't stop shaking. 10:17 p.m. I have such vivid dreams that I feel as though I'm awake during them, even though I'm actually not lucidly dreaming. I end up waking up remembering everything that happens in the dream and feeling tired from all of the work and thinking I had to do in the dream. 12 Yo. Had a big shared backyard with my neighbor's house. Lots of the neighborhood kids would regularly come and play. One night after some hide and seek it was time to come back in. I entered the back door of my house and saw the basement door was shut and deadbolted. I looked down to take off my shoes and boom, the basement door was wide open. An increase in air pressure might explain it. But all the basement windows were open. All of the first floor windows were also open. No one else heard the loud boom I heard. Walking home from school. This must be almost 30 years ago now. In a fairly built-up suburban area in the UK. I saw something a little way ahead of me on the pavement that looked to be moving. As I got closer I realized it was a fairly decent sized, 2 to 3 pounds, carp. Not the ornamental type but a lake river fish. I used to fish at the time. It was still alive so could only have been there a very short time. I picked it up and ran around looking for water when I saw that one of houses had a small goldfish pond, so I dropped it in there. I have no idea where this fish came from, and I'd imagine that the owners of the pond were equally puzzled when they discovered this new carp in their garden. I was heading downstairs carrying a tray of food for my brothers and I to eat. To the left of the stairs is a wall, but before the stairs and the wall there is a living room to the left where my dad sometimes sits and chills in. This time, before you left reaching the stairs and wall, I looked to my left to see my dad in his usual spot smoking a cigarette, clear as day, though he seems to have shaved or something. 2 stairs down I realize my dad doesn't smoke. I look again and I sit you not there's nobody there, but I saw the smoke from the cigarette rise and then disappear. Stood still for 15 minutes in shock before my brother came to check on me and thought I was crazy. I'm not crazy. As a young teen, my friend and I were playing with a Ouija board. Being a curious virgin, I asked it the name of the first girl I would sleep with. It spelled out the name, Nancy. Neither of us knew anyone named Nancy, so we both laughed and moved on. I didn't touch a Ouija board again until 3 years later. At a house party, we were all taking turns asking it silly questions. One person in the group was a girl I had just met that evening. Her name was Nancy, and you can probably imagine how my night ended. Very, very weird. After putting my daughter to sleep, she was around 4 or 5 at the time. I laid next to her for a while to go to sleep as well, but I could not fall asleep. For some reason I kept thinking of my daughter's name in my head and she woke up and said, "What, mom?" And I told her. I didn't say anything, sweetie, and she said, "Yes you did, you kept saying my name over and over." Another time I dreamed that the father of my kids had shot his brother-in-law with a gun. I woke up crying and told him about my dream, and he told me that it was very strange since he had been thinking of shooting him that night. So there's this band called Birthday Massacre that a weeb introduced to me in the 7th grade. They were Japanese, spoke Japanese and seemed all around weird. Watched some of their videos for a few months, forgot about them. 6 years later start listening to them again, except all their music is in English. Watch all the videos, same thing except the band is white. I still have no clue what the frock happened. I once saw a car without a driver on the interstate and there was even someone in the passenger seat talking to literally nobody in the driver's seat.